What up, y'all? I made a mistake in the previous episode. It wasn't 114. It was actually 115. That would make this one 116. At any rate, so people often ask me, like, yo, dude, how did you come up with this persona? Like, by the way, thank you for tuning in to C4CW Casting 495 Celebrities Worldwide. So you notice how, like, my tone is different now? How I'm just chilling. Man, out here in the East, dude, brutally cold, man. Freezing cold. But you know, that's how the winters are. And but anyway, just got to put on layers, man, and just be a trooper. But anyway, so people ask me, they're like, yo, how did you, like, you do all this, like, outrageous stuff, like, and you act eccentric, and you got this whole persona, and with this OSGOE, big Grove dog, once a Grove, and, but, like, who's the real you? Well, dude, it's easy for me to explain that to you. See, what's interesting about people and human beings, man, is people, when they conjecture certain information, they lead themselves to believe things about people, such as there are those who are assumptive, and they would assume that, based on what they've heard of me over the years, like, oh yeah, man, we've heard your, like, wild and zany, like, wacky, like, raps and commentary and blah blah blah, and it's just really outlandish, right? And then they're like, but man, you never really talk about you. Like, you never talk about you. Like, who are you? Like, who's the real you, like, behind the, like, character that you created? Well, first of all, dude, I didn't really create the character, first of all. It was a nickname that was given to me by one of my homeboys. So, and we were skateboarders. So that's where that comes from. For those who have listened to my podcast and my commentary and Reverb Nation, my different sound bites and things that I've talked about over the years, they already know that. They already know that backstory. And they also know about my academic background. Those of you who have listened to the podcast and to the show and other shows that I've been on. But in terms of me, dude, and what motivates me and why I do what I do, well, dude, first of all, man, well, I guess this would be second of all. Secondly, the reason I do what I do, I'm going to explain that in great detail here for my fans. And by the way, just in case anyone wants some stats, dude, this show is off the ground, and I'm going to put some money behind it. It hasn't been financed yet. It has, in the sense that I paid for the show, created it and paid for the artwork and whatnot. But in terms of, like, advertising, I haven't even put any advertising dollars into it, but I will be doing that. So that said, my motivation, dude, I guess I've never really talked about it in anything, any of the different commentary until just now. And so let's get to it. So here's the deal, dude. It's really fucking simple. It really, truly is. The reason I do what I do, man, is because when I was a kid, both my parents were in the military, and they were overseas at times. My father was in the Vietnam War. In fact, you know what? I don't even want to fucking call him my father, dude. I just say my dad, because he's not a father figure to me. And we're going to talk about that too, just for people who think that, I wouldn't touch upon this subject. I've actually talked about it a little bit, but we're going to go into detail about it. That's what this particular show's about, this particular episode here. So, my parents, man, they were away a lot of times. And so I'd be, like, at a babysitter's, in other words, like another family member, or, had babysitters and whatnot, and that weren't family members, just as kids do, right? But I usually stayed with relatives of mine. My grandmother at the time, she passed a long time ago, about 9 years ago-ish, and loved grandmother dearly. and or I'd stay with my aunt and uncle and their sons, one of whom is my age, and so I've talked about that too. But what I haven't really gone into much is my dad. So for those of you who are just tuning in, man, and who listen to the show, and maybe you've listened to some of the shows or some of the content, maybe you haven't listened to all of the shows. So I'll give you very, very quick backstory. So my uncle, who lived across town on the other side of town from where my mother and I lived, which was very close to my grandparents' estate, by 2 blocks. So my grandmother lived in a middle income community. They were middle class. They were both, my grandfather and grandmother, World War II veterans, and they were retirees. So they had a pension that they lived on. And they didn't really have a need for money because they had money. Nonetheless, they were middle class. So my mother, when she went back to college, or rather, I should say, when she went to college and finished her degree, she earned her degree in business. She had started off in microbiology and had thought to be a medical doctor. She was a candy striper. If anyone knows what a candy striper is, she worked in a hospital or in a home for seniors, and she had patients. She, during that experience, realized that that's not something that she wanted to continue to do. So she went and got her degree in business. And once she earned her degree, that afforded us the ability to purchase. So we bought a home that was literally right next door to my grandparents' home, like literally like right there, like adjacent. And there was another time when we had a condominium, and my mother was military full time. I'm sorry, that's not. Well, okay, yeah, she had been in the Army full time, but when she transferred into the Navy, she was in the Navy Reserves. So during her time in the military, my dad was not around at all. Other than the times that we visited him in different states. I believe Oklahoma, New Jersey, Kansas, California, probably some other places. But yeah, so like, and he was not there other than those times. He was not around at all, like zero, zilch, zip, not at all, not once, other than the times when we visited him. And so he had been in the Vietnam War. He was not in the hospital when I was born. He wasn't there when I was born. He was never around, ever, not one time. And never bought any baby formula for my mother and my sibling, and never, ever, not one time did he ever do anything financially to assist my mother. And so he was never there. He was never around. Wasn't at the hospital when I was born. So his child's born, and he wasn't there at the hospital. And he never supported my mother financially, never gave her any money, zero, not one penny, not one baby formula bottle, packet, not any food, fruits, vegetables, anything, nothing whatsoever. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking, well, yeah, hey, that's pretty common. Yeah, it is. So, but in terms of my personal experience, I'm going to elaborate, because a lot of people, they don't want to talk about their history or their experience, and they want to hide this shit. So I'm going to tell you guys. So, because I have no qualms about conveying this information to the audience. So, my dad, every time I was around him, when we did visit him, what I remember, because I was a high IQ kid and I was in special programs for kids with high IQ, tested for gifted programs and whatnot. when I was around, and so I remember this clearly. This part I do remember clearly in terms of when we did go to see him at different military bases, installations in the different states. When I saw him, he was mean. He was mean. He wasn't like extremely violent, but he would hit his children with a belt. And so here's the deal. Like I was a baby and he was a martial arts instructor in the US military. So he had this big thick belt and he would hit his child with the belt. I don't have children and I never will. And if I did, I wouldn't never hit my children with the belt. And I know that's the old way of doing things, but the way he did it, I remember the way he did it. He didn't do it for like punishment purposes. He just did it to be mean. He was just fucking mean because he's a mean man. He's a mean person and he pretends like he's not, but he fucking is. And so he wasn't extremely violent in that way, but you don't hit a little baby with a belt. Okay. And, he also, I believe it was New Jersey. I was in New Jersey and I had a hamburger, fries, and milkshake. And the milkshake spilled in his car. So he stopped the car, got out, and fucking hit me with the belt because I was like 2 years old. So he fucking hit me with the belt when I was a kid, right? So I always remembered that my dad was fucking mean. Like he was mean and I didn't like it and I didn't want to be around him, period. So the fact that my mother and dad were never married actually made me feel good as a kid. Like I didn't want to be around him, right? But as I got older when I was a teenager, junior high school, going into high school, occasionally I would talk to him on the phone because he would call and he'd be like, hey, just wanted to like wish you a happy birthday or some fucking bullshit, right? And I was like, yeah, okay, dude. And then he'd be like, hey, how's it going? And so then in my mind, on occasion I would think, well, he was in the Vietnam War. He probably has PTSD and all this kind of shit, right? This is how I used to think when I was a kid. Now it's like, man, that dude is like cut off from me. Like, I don't, I'm going to explain why. So he, when I was a junior high school student going into high school, this dude would call on holidays and stuff like that. And he would, it was always a ruse. He was always like, hey, I'm going to send you guys some money. He never fucking sent a single goddamn fucking penny to my mother ever, ever, ever. He kept telling my sister and I that he was going to, fucking give us $100, right? Now, this is from a man who never gave his son one fucking penny ever. Never bought any diapers, never bought any fucking bottles and formula, never bought any food, not one fucking pea or, not one fucking, corn, nothing, man. Like this dude didn't fucking, not even one little sprig of like fruit, vegetable, nutrients, nourishment. Not one fucking pixel in the Planck length of the universe at the Planck level of time, space fucking time. Okay. So then to add insult to injury, when we're older, right? He's telling us this story for years that he's going to send us $100 fucking dollars, right? So at some point, what my mother does is she's like, hey, your dad finally sent that $100 that he's been talking about for like 10 fucking years. We're like, really? And we're kids, right? So we're like, yeah, dad fucking sent us 100 fucking measly piece of shit fucking dollars. So my sister and I, we went to the mall, we bought whatever, we bought, right? And then when we were adults, like in our 20s, then my mother explained that, the shit never came from my dad. He never fucking sent the money. It wasn't him. And we're like, what? Right? So this dude, he never, and then of course my mother had to fight, to get fucking child support from the dude. And it took we were already adults when she got it. And then it was like some bullshit that he had to fucking pay back in terms of like, he didn't even pay like what he should have, naturally paid as a dad. So he never gave us any money. Right? So then when I lived in Chicago, right, he and his wife, not my mother, because my mother never married the dude, right? when I went to Chicago, cause, I'm still thinking, man, he's Vietnam War, he ain't right, man. And, but the thing is, man, he has like 15 kids, right? And I don't give a fuck. And this is why I'm telling y'all. I mean, I do give a fuck that he didn't support my mother because my mother had to pay for everything. And he never paid for shit until, until he was required to pay child support. But keep in mind, we were in our fucking 20s at that time. So, obviously my mother, she got, payments from him that were enforced. But the thing about it was that it was a small fucking amount of money. It was like nothing. Right. So, but nonetheless, he had to pay her back something. Right. And so when I'm in Chicago, now keep in mind, I'm still holding out thinking, man, the dude, he's PTSD, Vietnam War era, and he was in the war. He went on multiple tours. So it wasn't just a one-time thing. And I know because I have his paperwork. I know the brigade that he was with. I know the unit that he was with. I have his paperwork. When I went to work with the government as a defense contractor, I got all of his information. When I got my U.S. passport, I have all his information, all his, where he served, where he was overseas, and his military rank. I have all that information. So this dude, when I go to Chicago, right, and I'm there for almost a year, this dude, his wife, and their kids, right, my stepsons, right, he shows me one night, he's like, oh yeah, and I see this jar filled with money. He's like, oh, every time I go out, man, and I come back, I put some money in the jar for the kids. And he was like, and he expected me to be like, oh, that's cool. I'm still remembering at that very moment that he never fucking gave us one fucking penny. Not one penny. Not and I'm listen, I'm in my 30s at that time. Then I'm in Chicago. I'm in my fucking 30s. And this dude, he has 2 younger children at the time, they're adults now, but 2 younger children at the time. And fucking, he's got this big ass jar where he goes out, whatever, and then comes back, boom, and throws money. And it's like, man, hundreds of dollars in this thing. And I was just like, oh, okay, that's cool. Good for you, man. I'm glad you're putting some money in there for, my stepbrothers and shit like that. While simultaneously thinking, man, this dude's never given me one fucking penny. The only exception to that is when I was in Chicago, he gave me some, I had a cell phone, that was one of those prepaid phones, and he put some money on my phone a few times, like $20. Okay. Keep in mind, I'm in my 30s. So like 20, $60, man. Okay. In 30 years, this dude spends $60 fucking dollars, right? On some cheap ass fucking airtime for some piece of shit fucking cell phone, right? So in my lifetime, this dude, he fucking spends 60 fucking weak ass dollars, man. And I'm like, wow, first time this dude's ever bought me anything. And it's airtime for my piece of shit at the time cell phone. Cause back then they didn't have the unlimited shit and you had to buy the pack, it was, the situation, whatever. I was a university fucking college student and shit on a tight budget. And it was just kind of like, okay, man, I got this phone and it needs airtime. And, so anyway, that was that, man. And so when I left Chicago, man, I just didn't even fucking tell him that I was leaving. I just got on, when I was several states away, I called him on the phone and I was like, hey, what's up, dude? And he's like, where you at? Your brother, blah, blah, blah. Cause, he has other wives that he's had. So, he's got like 15 kids. So one of his sons, one of my step brothers that's not too much younger than me. He's, hey, you're supposed to be with, are you with, such and such? And I was like, nah, man, nah, dude, I'm like fucking 10, I'm like 10 states away, man. And he's like, what? And he's like, nah, stop playing. And I was like, nah, dude, I'm gone. Like, man, nah, dude, like, nah, I'm not anywhere close, man. And he's like, huh? What do you, man? No, man, come on, stop playing. Like, I'm being serious. And I was like, yeah, dude. Yeah, man, I left, man. I'm fucking gone, dude. He's like, what the fuck? How are you just gonna leave Chicago without telling anyone? And I'm just like, man, just don't even worry about it, dude. You know what I mean? Like, just skip the games, dude, because you've been playing fucking games like my whole life, man. You don't fucking need to know. You don't have a need to know, man. And, man, so that was that, right? So this dude, man, he's been in war. He's been stationed in Seoul, South Korea. He's been in Germany. He's been in Panama. He's been all over the fucking world, right? He did work with military police, special operations, jumping out of fucking helicopters. You know what I'm talking about? And this dude can't even fucking spend any money, like, on his kids, like, that he had with my mother. Like, really, dude? You can't fucking spend a single fucking penny, man, in, like, 30-something years, dude, to, like, feed your fucking children, man? Man, what the fuck? Man, I don't give a fuck. Man, really, PTSD, dude? And you're not going to feed your fucking children? Yeah, but you're feeding your other children, right? With the other women and shit, right? Okay? So that's my dad, dude. That's my dad. And so check this out. So that's number one. Well, so that's the first part of what I want to share with the audience. The second part of it is that when I was growing up in the neighborhood that I grew up in, man, there were hella racist motherfuckers. And they used to fucking tease me when I was a kid, man. And, they used to throw rocks at me and shit. They used to throw apples at me and fucking, apple dapple. And they'd you fucking nigger. And they'd, throw some shit at me, dude. And so, my dad was a martial artist, man. And I used to, when I talked to him when I was in junior high school and high school off and on, he'd tell me about his martial arts and, and the history of all this kind of stuff, right? So when I was a kid, when I still, thought, oh, well, maybe there's a grain of hope that, my dad is actually gonna be like a dad, right? So he'd tell me all this shit about like, yeah, so, I was training with these people and I met, Bruce Lee's relatives and all this kind of shit, right? Because he's had students and he's a very highly ranked martial artist. And that's why he was teaching martial arts in the U.S. military. So when I was a kid, again, still like, having that one grain of like, hope, like, yeah, man, maybe you can, maybe I can actually have a dad, right? Who fucking gives a shit, right? So I would be out like in the yard, man, like training like, for kung fu and like ninja shit, right? With my homeboys, from the neighborhood, my pupils and, my peers and colleagues from school. And we'd just be out there, man, just going at it. Cause, that was the 70s and the 80s, right? That's the time that I'm talking about is back in the 70s going into the 80s. And it was a big deal, man, because, we had, for us as kids, they had the TV show, that would come on. It was called, there was Kung Fu Theater. That was so huge, man. That was like pre-Nintendo era. So like anything that was like martial arts at the time, of any kind of like mainstream, content value, it came on, a handful of shows. So there was a Kung Fu Theater. I believe there was also Ninja Theater, or was it Ninja Theater, Kung Fu? One of them was a theater. They might have both been theaters, after the names of the art. But nonetheless, man, like every boy I know from my class, from my school, and in the city, dude, like was watching that show. Plus they had Black Belt and Ninja magazine that came out in the stores. So we collected all those, man. And again, this is pre-Nintendo. This was the fad. This is the trend. This is what every one of my friends was doing back then. We had our bandanas that were black, like the movie that I've joked about, Band of the Hand. Man, we had our black bandanas on. We had our names like written on that shit, right? Like our monikers, because we had different names back then. And fucking, man, we'd be out on the playground, kung fu fighting, man, like just fucking ninja shit, like doing flips and rolls and, you know what I'm saying, attacks and counterattacks and all kinds of shit, right? Defensive moves, offensive moves. We'd be studying the fucking charts and, because there's no internet back then. So reading the books, we'd go down to the martial arts like ninja shop where you could get the fucking shurikens and the blades and the fucking stars and the swords and tanto blades and all this kind of shit, right? That's what we were into, dude. We did that shit. And kids would be like, dude, your dad's a ninja, man. And I'd be like, yeah, that's what he told me. You know, because I asked him once, I was like, yo, Dad, are you a ninja? And he's like, well, you know, you could pretty much say that. And I was like, because I'm a fucking kid, so he's just telling me some shit, right? He's a Dan, I guess, Don, you know, and so he's telling me these stories and stuff, and so kids were like, yeah, man, let's get trained up, dude. So we'd be out on the playing field, recess, in the streets, in the neighborhood, right? And then these kids, man, that used to tease me and shit, man, because I'm half white, half black, and they'd be like, you fucking nigger, right? I'd be like, all right, what's up then? And we'd come out, man, and we'd just like go out, blah, blah, blah. We just start fucking throwing down. And I felt better, like, yo, man, I'm standing up for myself, man. Fuck these kids, right? So pretty soon, man, my dudes in our part of town, we're coming up on high school, and I've talked about this before in part, but we, aside from having like skirmishes and scuffles with kids, man, and throwing down, going bare knuckle and shit, nunchucks, fucking stabs, we would man, at some point, when we're still just innocent kids, man, just, we got our fucking dirt, our bikes and shit, BMX bikes and skateboards. I've talked about that at length. But man, one of the things that happened was after that age of innocence, that's when the fucking police, man, in our neighborhood flipped on us, man, and they were no longer officer friendly from the school who would come out and shown us, the different drugs. Don't do this. It's called marijuana, kids, and it's not legal, right? And he shows you all this is powder cocaine. And it's a little packet, and they pass it around the room and shit. This is that. And you're like, oh, officer friendly. Wow. Thanks for showing us this. And he's like, yeah, if you guys ever need any help in the community, just wave at me and say, I'm officer friendly, right? Help us, officer friendly. There's a cat in the tree, right? So at some point, man, when they staged up the whole Iran-Contra affair and carried that shit out, I've talked about this too. That's when I just saw mass corruption, man. That's when I saw mass corruption. Now it's like, at that time, 1980s, mid-80s going into the 1990s, early 1990s, that's when I really saw, man, the whole like facade, like when it was just like revealed to me and like divulged and like disclosed, like I saw the whole fucking thing. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay. So we're innocent kids and children, and this is what it's really about, right? So now when Officer Friendly's not in the classroom, right? Now he's rolling up on us when we got our skateboards, and he's snapping our skateboards in half. Wow. Hey man, my family was pretty fucking poor, right? And had my mother not gone back to school and gotten her degree, we would have probably fucking still been living in the projects, right? The low income housing projects, right? Yeah. Hey man, guess what? I never had a brand fucking new skateboard ever. Never had a brand new skateboard. You know why? Because back then, man, they were like 100 and some odd, like $150 back then. Okay? Back in the 1980s, that was expensive. That was a lot of money for a kid to have back then, man, where I come from. Right? So, but I knew some kids that did. So I always had to get the hand-me-down boards, decks, right? So, like I talked about before, I tossed one of my homeboys, some buds or whatever, some healthy buds, right? And some cash, like 20 something bucks. I think I gave him like a 9mm or 45 or some shit. And, cause I did the opposite reverse trade, at some point. But, yeah, man, I got a skateboard that was skatable, that had been used, but it was still relatively new, right? So that's how I got my first skateboard. So for the police to roll up, man, and snap your board in half back then, it was just kind of like, wow, really, dude? Or your parka that you bought from the mall that's like $400 that took you like 2 years to save up that money, fucking raking leaves and shit, man. Shoveling snow, washing cars, fucking doing landscaping as a child fucking slave, basically because you're doing work in the neighborhood. I mean, hey, look, I get it. You're being entrepreneurial, but it's like, yo, man, how much are you really getting from, mowing someone's lawn? Here's $5, kid. Thanks for mowing my fucking lawn. and you're like, well, I needed the money, right? I mean, that's pretty much fucking child slavery, dude. Yeah, you're not forced into it, but, how else are you going to get money, man, when, your mom's giving you $1 a day for allowance, like to buy the lunch fucking thing at the school, and before that, you were getting it free because you're on the government fucking program, right? So, dude, so when these cops, man, and I work in national security, so I'm not saying that all cops are bad. I don't want anyone to get that impression, because it was never the case, and it never has been. So anybody out there that's just like, man, fuck all cops, you're like, really, man? Fuck you, dude. Come on, man, fuck you, dude. I have a relative who's a police officer, man, and bro, like, man, some police officers, they actually help people out. Okay, so my point is, when in my community the police started rolling up on us, man, and just beating us down and shit on a daily fucking basis, like Bone Thugs talk about, Bone Thugs and Harmony, right? Because that happened in my neighborhood too, and that's real shit. And I know about 151 dudes from the Riverside neighborhood that I come from. They can attest to that, man, and they can tell you that it happened to them too, because we were deep in our hood, bro, and we're dudes that grew up playing sports together, man. Every sport you can think of: soccer, football, baseball, basketball, swimming, fucking racquetball. Yeah, man, because we play racquetball too at the YMCA. And I was fortunate enough to have an uncle who had some money, and he was quite generous and a nice dude. And so he bought my cousin, who's my age, and I fucking top-notch rackets so that we could play racquetball at the YMCA. And he also bought us a membership to the YMCA, which was hella expensive. So I was privileged to have that, man. And I played a lot of sports. So when they staged up the Iran-Contra affair, man, and they started letting open the floodgates of the dope coming into the communities, man, cops had to set people up, some of them, man. Some of the police, not all of them, but a lot of them. So, man, they're like, oh, hey, what's up with your guys' Raiders parkas, huh? Why don't you come over here? And then they'd be like, yeah, we're taking this shit. They just take our stuff, man. We're a kid. Not all of us were low income, but it didn't matter, man. If you had a Raiders parka and you were a boy in my neighborhood that was around, and we were friends at the time, man, you'd have your stuff taken from the police, man. Sometimes multiple times a day. Like, you get something from the mall, they take it from you. They'd see you some hours later, man, they roll up again. They'd be like, man, we told y'all to get off these streets. Come here. And they'd go up in our pockets, man. Oh, y'all got, what's this, drug money? It's like, nah, dude, it's $20. Yeah, it's ours now. Okay? So man, that's why I said to myself, you know what, man? These dudes, man, these wannabe Gestapos, man, they think, man, they're talking all this shit. They're saying all this stuff, right? They're trying to degrade and denigrate, and they're trying to fucking berate and belittle, right? They're trying to fucking just smear, campaign, it all the way, and they're just like, fuck you kids, you'll never amount to anything. You'll never be shit. You guys will never, ever, ever, ever turn out to be any fucking thing. You guys are fucking criminals. Fuck you all. You guys are fucking criminals. You'll never amount to anything good in society. They used to tell us that shit all the time, man. Every single day. Every single day. And they'd follow us around the neighborhood, man. And they'd be like, get off these streets. We told you. And we're like, man, we ain't doing anything, man. We're just out here on skateboards. And they'd fucking run over another skateboard. Okay? So I told myself, I said, you know what, man? I'm going to switch it up on these dudes. And I vowed. I knew and I cared, and I did it. Because I told myself, man, these motherfuckers have no idea, man, that I'm going to work for the government in the future. They have no idea. Both my parents were U.S. military, man. I'm about to become a defense contractor. And so I did. And that's exactly what I did. I became a defense contractor. And they thought that would never, ever happen. So since my mother had actually done her job as a mother, and she actually took care of my sister and I, and she was quintessentially, ideally, a mother. She was a mother, and she did the only thing with her was that she had these boyfriends, and the boyfriends were not fucking, they were just not nice, dude. They didn't buy my sister and I fucking gifts, dude, and shit like this, man, on holidays, like, dudes should do if they're like dating women and stuff like that. And so, man, so just again, just some more fucking shit that kids that who grow up in those types of economic situations. Now, keep in mind, we're middle class at this point. Like, we're not living in housing projects. We're living in a home that we own, that my mother purchased. We're living in a condominium. We're living in a nice apartment at some point, right? And just because she wanted an apartment, and so put stuff in storage, sell the house, and at any rate, we were not impoverished. That was just like the first 8 years of our life that we didn't have much. But my mother got a higher paying job in her role in government and in industries, and she worked at the top secret level, TSSCI, and I've talked about that before, so I'm not going to go into details about that. And a lot of what she did to this day is still classified. So since she did take care of us, I spent a lot of time when I was a kid in public libraries. I've talked about this too. And that's what kids did back then, is kids from my generation, we actually went to public libraries. And I had friends, man, that were also high IQ, that were also intellectuals, and they had high intellect because, man, I went, despite living for those first few years of my life in the housing projects community, neighborhood there, part of the neighborhood, we still had some of the best schools in the U.S. Like our school district, we still had great, a great educational system. So my cousins were super smart. They're all degreed. One of my cousins lived in England, earned his degree there. And so we had access to educational resources. And again, we had no internet because the internet did not exist. So since I had that background and I had that instilled in me and ingrained in me and was inculcated with those types of teachings and tools, and then I had an uncle who I've often talked about, raised me essentially with his wife, my aunt, who also raised me, my mother's sister. When my mother was out of town with the military, I'd stay with my aunt and uncle, and they took care of my sister and I. And my uncle was an assistant coach at the Boys and Girls Club, which, where I come from, it doesn't matter your socioeconomic background, if you live on the side of town, whether they got the fancy homes where my uncle lived, if you live on the other side in the riverside down by the projects, didn't matter, man. Kids in my town, Boys and Girls Club in my town, from north to south, east to west, the whole city, the county, kids from a certain age to a certain age, we all played at the Boys and Girls Club, man. That was what kids did back then. That's what we did in the 70s and 80s. And it was a tradition. And we'd all have our shirts from our respective schools. But it is true that my uncle, he was able to have me come over and play on the other side of, for the school rather, that was on the other side of town. And so I had that rearing, I had that background, and that's why all the sports that I played and everything that I studied, I knew that even though the street shit was going down in the 1980s and 1990s, I always knew in the back of my mind, everything that I was studying, that I was amassing in terms of information and knowledge, I would apply it to work as a government defense contractor. So I had been living essentially a double life. So I'm on the streets with dudes from the hood, from my neighborhood, because we all grew up together, a lot of us, right? And so we're on the streets, right? Because all this stuff is going on, Iran Contra affair, drugs in America, gangs and shit like this. I've talked about this too before. And even when all that stuff was going on, man, I always knew that whatever I was learning then at the time, I would apply it toward government defense contract work. And so, but this is true as well. So I had this girlfriend at the time, and we were together for about 4 years, and I think it was like 4 3/4 years or something like that, man. And she was, when I first met her, super cool. And I never cheated on her. She wasn't loyal to me. One of the dudes from my neighborhood, couple dudes, man, she ran off, man, with the meth head, with the dude that was in the meth. And I was just like, wow, really? Huh. Used to play basketball with you, dude. We're both from the Riverside. Wow, interesting, man. Yeah. Okay, man. Fuck you. And so, you know, when you're a kid and you have girlfriends, right? You're a boy, and you're 20 something years old, and you date someone because you think that this person's like cool, and you're like, yo, yeah, you're my girlfriend, right? And then you just find out, man, that she ain't cool like that, right? So there had been a point when we were watching movies, and the movie Boys in the Hood had come out. So you can look at what year that was. Boys in the Hood, when Boys in the Hood came out, that was like the #1 movie in America. That was like a big thing. And since I'm from the West Coast, that movie, to us, man, that hit home because that was right down the street from where we were, right? And when I was in Oakland, California, even closer, just like right down the street, right? Because they're in LA, Bay Area is not too far, man. And so that stuff was going down, like in that movie. And so man, there was this dude that came to our high school, and he played basketball, and he was a basketball star, and he did all these tricks and everything. And then at the end, he gave us this presentation, and he says, if you have a goal, if you have a dream in life, like to do something career wise, and you know that you can make this your career, like if you want to be an astronaut, if you want to like join the Space Force, if you want to do this, if you want to do that, right? In terms of like a career, right? Become the president, whatever, he said, don't let anyone tell you. Now I know it sounds cliche, but the way he presented it, he said it in a different way, and I can't remember exactly to a T verbatim what he said, but I was impressed by his presentation. Black African American gentleman, light-skinned dude, and he just said, man, he said because there will be people who won't believe in you. They won't believe in you. They won't believe in you. But man, he said, despite those folks that for whatever reason, they don't think you can achieve your career goals, he said, man, don't let them try to talk you out of it. Don't let them talk you out of it. So we're watching the movie Boys in the Hood, and the part where the the part where Larry Fishburne he says he brings spoiler alert he brings the kids start to congregate. Is it Fishburne? Larry Fishburne? I don't know, Mandela effect, man. So he says I can't remember, man, but who knows, man, maybe it has switched up in the real world, Mandela effect. Because I heard that Seth MacFarlane, his name has changed in the Mandela effect. And I can't remember if it's Seth MacFarlane or Seth MacFarlane or, what it is at this time, space juncture. But so anyway, Larry, I'll go with Fishburne. He basically says, look, man, you see what's happening in the hood right here? We got a liquor store on every corner. And he's like, got the whole vernacular thing going on because it's in the hood. And he's telling them, man, how you think them drugs get here on these streets? And kids are like, I don't know, I never thought about it. That's a good point that you're making. And he's like, yeah, you never really thought about it, did you? And they're like, nah, go on, bro, preach to us, man. Tell us what's happening. And he's like, man, you know any black men that fly planes? And they was like, now that you mention that, nah, man, I don't know any nigga that fly a plane. And he's like, that's how them drugs get into the country. Motherfucker, you ain't seen no black man fly no plane, bring in the drug and the shit in the neighborhood. That's my rendition. But you know, and then he goes on and he does this bit where he talks about in that same sketch speech, he says, black man ain't got no right in the white man's army. Some shit like this, right? And I thought, damn, really? Why not? Like, my dad was in the war and he's black man, black African American. I mean, you know, says African, but he's, you know, Native American, and has hazel eyes, man. But you know what I mean? I guess by military definition, you can only choose one or the other, and there is no in between. So he chose black African American, and I was told that he's black African American, but I also know that he's Native American. So, partially. So, but at any rate, you know, he's dark skinned from the South. And, yeah, man. So, but he was so I'm like, why not? But of course I got it at the same time. I'm like, okay, well, what he's talking about is colonialism and how land was stolen from the Native Americans. And, you know, there's always been this history of this, like, you know, racism and prejudice, you know, and all this kind of stuff. Right. And, civil rights movement and clashes and all of this kind of stuff, all of this stuff that went on in history. And so when he made that speech, he's like, yeah, black man ain't got no place in the white man's army. Well, I'm half white, Caucasian, right? And nonetheless, even growing up, having police like beat us down with nightsticks and stuff like, get in, we're taking your pagers, you're drug dealers, we're taking your parka, you're gang members, we're taking your money, you're fucking criminals, right? Even through all that shit, man, when they were trying to do that Nazi Germany, America shit back in the 80s and 90s with the Iran-Contra affair, setting up all these motherfucking drug lords and people, man, to sell the drugs for them to finance their war overseas that was illegal, right? Even though, man, that shit was going down, in the back of my mind, I'm like, yo, my grandfather was in World War II. My grandmother was in World War II. My mother is in the military. My dad was in the military. They're both retired. And, yo, man, I'm going to join the military. Guess what? Guess what my girlfriend at the time says. Now, keep in mind, she's white Caucasian, and I'm half white. And in the town that I'm from, it used to be predominantly white Caucasian. And so, you know, she looks to me and she's like, you know what? He's right about that. I don't want you to join the army. And I was like, what? She's like, yeah, well, you heard what he just said, right? And I was like, man, you're tripping. Like, you're just what? Man, all my uncles were in the Korean War, you know what I'm saying? And I have relatives that are adopted that are Korean, and my dad was in Korea, stationed in Seoul, South Korea, and you know, my uncles were not only in the Korean War, but I have, you know, uncles that were in the military and stationed in different parts of the world, and aunts, you know, I have aunts, great aunts that were in the military, like my whole family. My sister enlisted in the military when she was fresh out of high school, and you know, joined the U.S. Marine Corps for a second, and then she changed her mind, and I was like, wow. Really? So she literally changed her mind. Like, I was like, man, what's going on with you and the Marines? And she was like, oh yeah, no, I signed up and I was about to go, but I changed my mind. So technically she started the process of joining, but she never actually followed through with it. So when it came time, man, for me to graduate from high school, I was looking at options and I was like, all right, man, I'll just go and join the U.S. military. So I went down and talked to some recruiters at the different branches, and I was like, what do I want to do, man? My mother was in the Army, and then she transferred into the Navy after 4 years of honorable service. Should I go Navy? Should I go Army? Should I go Coast Guard? Should I go Marines? How about the Air Force? So I talked to different recruiters, man, over different periods of time, and went in, listened to the pitch and the spiel. And so my era, you got Gulf War I, Gulf War II. Got the Persian Gulf popping off, right? And there had been issues with corrupt law enforcement, fucking abuses of human beings in the United States. But keep in mind that even though there were some dirty cops, corrupt cops, man, where I'm from, nonetheless, man, I'm a U.S. patriot all the way, 100%, and not a fan of Snowden. So yeah, man. So I'm like, and then this is true, man. This is true. This is all true, and that's why I'm telling you, the audience. So what happened, man, was I was being told different things by different recruiters, and I just decided to forego the process because I'm gonna explain this. Because, man, I knew that I was going to work in government as a defense contractor at some point, and I was like, man, I'm not a conscientious objector. I understand the need for a strong national defense posture. Totally with that and for that. But yeah, man, I was looking at the Gulf War, and this is my opinion. This is my opinion as a United States U.S. patriot. My dad, when he was in the Vietnam War, man, he was sprayed with Agent Orange, and our government didn't want to admit that it abused soldiers to put their lives on the line. Okay, I understand there's been a lot of shit our government's done. I get that. COINTELPRO, J. Edgar Hoover, all of his illegal domestic spying, and all of the setups and all the shit that he was behind and did, and others in his under him, and other eras. I got that, man. That shit happens all over the world. It's just not the United States. But man, I put it all together. And this is true, man. I'm just being 100% candid, frank, and honest with y'all. So, man, the Gulf War, there was something about it, man, that in my mind seemed faulty at the time. People can say whatever. Oh, man, that's how you rationalize not joining the military. Well, first of all, man, I had a choice as to whether I wanted to join and serve the country as, armed forces personnel at the time. And I weighed my options. And the Gulf War, man, it didn't look legit to me. It didn't. And you got this scenario, man, where from my vantage point at the time, I'm like, yo, man, they're just going after the oil. I'm not gonna fucking defend that shit, man. That ain't my battle. That ain't my war. I ain't gonna fight this one, man. And also, when I look at the history of Vietnam and everything that went down over there, man, that shit was a setup too, man. That shit wasn't legit in my book. So I'm just saying, man, like, I get it. Like, I know why our government did what it did, but I wasn't going to fight that battle, man. And that's when I would have joined, and I would have been in the Gulf for 1 and 2. And listen, I commend everyone who put their lives on the line and who served in that conflict. Because quite honestly, man, though I knew that they were just going in to get oil and energy, Saddam Hussein was a bad dude, man. Like, I don't give a fuck what anybody says. Well, the country was better, like, under him and all this nah, man, fuck that shit. That dude needed to fall, man. He needed to fall. He needed to be deposed, man. And that dude needed to fucking he seriously needed to be taken out, man. That dude was an awful fucking less than human dude. That dude was fucking, he was evil, just like any other dictator. So anyone who supported his downfall, hey man, I salute men and women in the armed forces who served in the desert in that conflict in every way, 100%. But that wasn't my battle, man. That wasn't mine. And think about this, man. Subsequent to that, when I had enough studies under my belt, when I had enough certifications, when I had enough experience, that's when I approached the government that had approached me at different times and offered to recruit. And I was like, look, man, I'm ready to be a United States defense contractor. I'm ready. Let's do it. And I was assisted in that way by people who helped me to become a defense contractor. And so that's what I did. And yeah, man. So that was the route that I took. And before when I was in, like I said, back when I was in high school, even then, I told myself, I was like, regardless of what's going on around me on these here West Coast streets, man, I've got to do something for the greater good of society. Like, I have to, man. Like, I have to, live up to my family's name and my grandfather and grandmother and aunts and uncles who served in the armed forces. I have to do something equivalent, and I have to help people. I have to help people, man. And so I went the path of becoming what I am now, which is a defense contractor. Simultaneously, I play the role of an outrageous, fucking eccentric rap artist. The name, I added to it a bit, but it was a name that was given to me by my homeboy, who was and still is one of the raddest West Coast skateboarders that I've ever known, and that a lot of people have known and have ever known. And yeah, man, I've talked about that before too. So technically, the name Grove, I didn't come up with that, man. That was given to me. That moniker, my moniker, was given to me by my homeboys, by my homeboy and my crew. And it's interesting, man. We started off as break dancers. We started off with the martial arts. We started off with the BMX and the skateboards. And that's really where our division of 495 began. And so yeah, man, that's why I do what I do, and that's where it all started in terms of what we do and my team. And a lot of people, they just see the antics, and they're like, yo, what's up with the antics, man? What's up with the persona, man, that you've created, and with the whole rap shtick and the whole hip hop rap shtick? What's up with that, bro? Like, man, that's just weird, man. You're fucking weird, man. Man, that shit's kind of crazy. And I'm just like, yeah, dude. Yup. I'm just a Grover.